Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So today we move to chapter 2 towards the functional grammar. And we'll discuss about the notion of grammar, building on traditional grammar, so kind of comparing functional grammar to traditional grammar, and then toward the functional grammar, and then clauses and their constituent parts. Okay, when we talk about grammar, we tend to refer it to a set of grammatical rules, so just like present tense, and then we have subject, and then we have verb, and then we have object. But actually, grammar can be defined as the way in which a language is organized. So not just a talk about rules, but every organization of language can be called as grammar. Because, for example, like a young child who has never learned about grammar at school, but they still will be able to produce correct sentences, even though they are still very young. It means that they can organize language even though they don't know the rules. So that's why here we can define grammar as the way in which a language is organized. And when we talk about traditional grammar, when we focus on the rules, then it makes people who speak the language become ashamed when they want to talk on when they want to write something. So that's why we now move into functional grammar. And a functional grammar is at first actually referred to communicative grammar of English in 1975 by Leach and Schwarzwijk, where they focus on the use of grammar to communicate rather than grammatical structure. So when they talk about grammar, they will have a questions like, how can I use grammar to communicate, not just to know exactly the rules and then to produce correct sentences, but more about how I can communicate with the grammar that I know. And then in the next 15 years, in 1990, a corpus-based or computer database grammar by the Colin Copied English Grammar was also discussed about functional grammar, which was consulted by Halliday, the founder of functional grammar. Here they defined or they used grammar as part of functional grammar by having this definition. So functional grammar is a grammar which puts together the patterns of language and the things you can do with them. It means that functional grammar is not just about rules, but more about patterns of the language and then things we can do with these patterns, with these words. So again, here we do not talk about the rules, but more about how we can use the language with the grammar we know. So the focus is on the thing we can do with them. And then when we talk about the difference between traditional grammar and functional grammar, where the functional grammar is rejecting the traditional grammar, then we have to know that the concept and the goals of the functional grammar are built on the past, not rejecting it. So whatever we have discussed in traditional grammar, we accept that and then we build on it, and then we go further. Like for example, in the parts of speech, we know that we have a verb, noun, adjective, adverb, pronoun, and so on. And usually when we talk about noun, when we ask someone what noun is something. Noun is a word that denotes a person, place, or things. Okay, so this is how we usually define noun in traditional grammar. But when we move these words like emotion, emergence, difficulty, emotion is not a person, not a place, and not a thing. So it's kind of hard to define this, even though this is a noun. So that's why then here in functional grammar we want to use this definition in more looking at the function, not just the class of words. And then next, for example, like verb. When we talk about verb, what verb is? Verb is the doing words, yeah, so activity. But when we have this sentence, I am a student, so am here is a verb, but am is not doing verb. Yeah, so am is not doing words, so it's hard to define how come it become verb. So here in functional grammar, we not only looking at the class of verb, like the class of words like verb, noun, and so on, but we also look at the function of the word in a clauses. For example, like these two examples. The first, Tulungagung is a town in the country. So we have country as a noun, town as a noun, Tulungagung as a noun. But focus on country because we have the, so this is a noun. But the second one, Tulungagung is a country town. Here, country is still noun, but country, the second country has a different function to the first country. Yeah, the first country is a noun by itself, but the second country is a noun but become classifier or a noun that function as has a function like adjective, because this country, the second country, is actually specify the town. Okay, so here, even though they have the same words, but when they occur in a clause in different position, they may have different functions. So that's why we want to discuss more about this. Okay, and because of those functions, so here we talk about the rank scale, so how the language or the human language works. So starting from morpheme as the smallest meaningful unit of language, and then move up to word, and then have phrases, or we call phrase as group 2, and then clause, and then clause complex. Okay, so when we talk about morpheme, when we have one or more morpheme, can be a word, because a word consists of one or more morpheme, like for example like the word sleep, for example. Sleep is one morpheme and also one word, but one word can be more than one morpheme, like sleeping, so it's a word but with two morpheme, sleep and ing. And then when we talk about word, move up, then we have phrase or group. So phrase is also can be called as group. So phrase can consist of one or more words. So like sleep can also be called as a phrase or a group. Okay, or like or sleeping is also a phrase. So why sleep, one word, can be a phrase? Okay, we will discuss about it later. Okay, let's move up here. A clause. Clause is consists of one or more phrases. Okay, so you have to remember again definition of a clause, and we'll talk about it after this. But you have to remember that a clause can be or can consist of one or more phrases. And then move up, then we have a clause complex, consists of one or more clauses. Okay, so clause complex consists of one or more clauses. Okay, we'll talk more about clause complex. Yeah, so we need to compare this. So what we usually know, a sentence, so we now compare between sentence and clause complex. What is sentence? Sentence is a piece of language that in English, conventionally, I think also in Indonesian, begins with a capital letter and ends at the next following full stop. So sentence is we can say groups of words which start or begins with capital letter and ends with full stop or with punctuation. This is sentence. But clause complex is actually similar to sentence. But clause complex is a language structure that consists of one clause working by itself or a group of clauses that work together through some kinds of logical relationship. We'll discuss more about this in chapter 7 later. But what we have to know is that what we call as clause complex is similar to sentence. See this example. Like this one, we have text 1, Mr. Hassan's call for a rise in interest rate should not surprise us. This is a sentence, right? Because we have capital letter and then we have full stop. And this sentence is also called as clause complex. Okay, how many clauses in this clause complex? How to know how many clauses? We have to know the verb. How many verbs can be found here? Mr. Hassan's call. This is not a verb. This is a noun. For a rise in interest rates should not surprise us. The verb is surprise. So this clause complex contains one clause. Okay, let's go to the next sentence. When the national economy is growing fast, many economic analysts will claim that interest rates should rise to prevent a situation of boom and bust. So this is also clause complex. And how many clauses? How many verbs? We have growing, we have claim, will claim, we have should rise, we have to prevent. So there are more than one clause, okay, in this clause complex. And we have also the last sentence. Of greater surprise are his optimistic long-term projection for growth in Australian manufacturing sector. Here we have one clause in this clause complex. So here again, so there are three sentences and it means there are three clause complex. And if we want to discuss in more detail, for example, the second clause complex, which is the longest, okay, see here. Okay, we analyze them. When the national economy is growing fast, so this is what we have as in the second sentence, and then we move them into clauses. Yeah, so when national economic is growing fast, many economic analysts will claim that interest rates should rise to prevent a situation of boom and bust. So there are four clauses in this clause complex. And how many phrases? And then we divide them into phrases or groups. The national economy is growing fast. Okay, here, have a look. Fast is one word, but it is also phrase. Maybe this is the only one, yeah. Okay, I mean the only phrase with one word. So why is it one word becoming a phrase? Because here we have constituent. I hope you remember in your syntax class. Constituent means the smallest part of a sentence which has a group. Okay, we will have a look more about this constituent after this. Yeah, but remember, phrases can be one word, and this is the example. Okay, and then when we talk about words, of course, we divide them into every word. When the national economy, so there are many words. Morpheme, and then we divide them into like a nation, all growing. So I'm sure you can again go back to your morphology class. Okay, before we talk up more about constituents, so here we have to remember that a clause is combination of words into meaningful message structure, and as I said, a clause minimum has one verb. And then let's see this. Okay, text 2, which is about monster. And then when we look at this text, when we try to divide them into clause complex, then we have to look at the full stop. So we have 1, 2, 3, and then 4, and then 5. So there are 5 clause complex. Okay, but how many clauses? Okay, when we see here, there are 15 clauses from 5 clause complex. And then next we analyze them further based on its constituent. Yeah, so as I said, the constituent is a kind of phrases or group. So if in syntax we know noun phrase, here we have nominal group. If we have a phrase, here we have verbal group. They are the same. Group is also phrase. Here we have conjunction group, and then adverbial group and prepositional phrase. So only one which is called as phrase. And then nominal group, we have ng, vg, but actually this should be small v. Yeah? Conjunction, g, adverb g, and then pp, prepositional phrase. So this is what we call as a constituent. So every constituent is like every group which can move together. In syntax class, we have also discussed about how to test constituent. Yeah, how to test a group. You can go back to that discussion. Okay, so in this, this is important. This is a basic analysis here. So here the example of how to analyze the text about the monster. So first, when we check a clause, every clauses, then we move, or we divided the clause into its constituent parts. So go back to the previous one. So we have to know which part is the nominal group, or which part verbal group, conjunction, and so on. Remember, not all of this always occur, always be found in a clause, but what must be found is the verbal group. Okay, let's see. One day is a nominal group. Why nominal group? One day is a time, right? Okay, we will talk about this later with next group. A monster is a nominal group. We have a noun with its modifier. Came, see, came is one word, but we call it as a phrase. This is a verbal group. Out of my hot water pipe is prepositional phrase. Okay, let's see the next analysis. So we have I as a nominal group, one word but also group, because this is one constituent. Was is a verbal group, and very frightened is nominal group. Why nominal group? This is adjective. We don't have adjective group. Adjective is part of nominal group. To make is verbal group. Friends, nominal group, with it as prepositional phrase because we have preposition in it. Okay, so from this we have a verbal group, came, and then was, and then to make, and those verbal group is called as going-ons, and we call them as process. So process is verbal group, and we'll discuss more about processes in the next material. And then we have participant, which is talking about subject and object, or who. Here we have one day as the participant, a monster as the participant, and then I as the participant, friends as the participant. But one day is part of circumstance. It's about how or when. So those are called as circumstance. Even though this is nominal group, can be part of circumstance. Circumstance can be nominal group, can be adverbial group, can also be what is one more? We will talk more about this later in the next discussions about process, participant, and circumstance. Okay, and the last part is function of language. So from this explanation, we have to remember again, going back to previous the previous discussions. First, we have built, which means that language has a representational function, and then we call it as experiential meaning, where we use it to encode. We use the language to encode our experience of world. It conveys a picture of reality. It allows us to encode meanings of experience which realize field of discourse. So remember, here we have field, and we discuss about experiential meanings, and this will be discussed further by group 1 and 2. And the second function, language as interpersonal function, we use it to encode interaction, interaction, and show how defensible we find our propositions. Thus, it allows us to encode meanings of attitude, interaction, and relationships with which realize tenor of discourse. So here we have tenor, and we call it as interpersonal meaning, and will be discussed by the following groups. there are two groups we'll discuss about interpersonal meaning. And the last meaning is language as textual function. So it's textual meaning. We use it to organize our experiential and interpersonal meanings into a linear or coherent whole, thus allows us to encode meanings of text development, which relies mode of discourse. So we have mode here, and we talk about textual meaning. So after interpersonal meaning, later we'll talk about textual meaning, and then after that we'll discuss about all of them in the last discussions. Okay, I think that's all that I can explain. I hope this can help you, and then you can ask me questions further. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.